sometimes that can protect you from certain situations. So here's what I have, and I need to explain what it is. And this, I think this mental model gets confused all across the country. And then as I relate to it, of course, please ask questions, because I think this is really helpful for coaches. So I truly believe the best coaches have what I call a telescopic lens, where they can really narrow down and they can really pull back. And coaches that don't quite meet that need, they tend to be either what I call macro coaches with a big view, or micro coaches with this real small, narrow view. Your best coaches have the ability to adapt and go up and down, like a telescope. So what I want to do first is I want to talk about the macro position. I want to talk about the position when you're coaching the little people, okay, which we've all coached. And even if your folks have moved beyond that, eventually you might get back into it and you might coach young kids again. So I believe at that the highest level, this big picture macro level, I believe that the major primary purpose is to instill a lifelong love of the sport. At its most basic level, if we get kids dying to come to practice, sprinting out of their car, running to the field, telling mom and dad they can't wait till the next practice, you are an unqualified success. I mean, that is priority one. When you coach young kids, if they can be excited about tonight's practice, you are absolutely an incredible coach. End of discussion, okay? So what happens far too often is macro level coaches with a big perspective, they read information, they learn about the game of baseball, and then as they learn about the game of baseball, they want to teach that to their kids. And every time they learn about the game of baseball, slowly that lens starts to get closer and closer and closer. And before you know it, they have this micro view of the sport. And then that's what I call overcoaching 101. When you take young kids and then you try to be too precise with them too early, and then those young kids, they start to question, wow, man, I thought I was just coming out here to have some fun. So make no mistake, there is a time and a place for dropping that lens, but at the youngest of ages, we have to have this very, very macro view. Okay, we have to pull back. Now, if you have that thing I'm looking at, I'm specifically looking at the top one, and that's got that big triangle there. And that is absolutely your focus is instill a lifelong love of the sport, and your focus is a love of the game. And I wrote there to the right of love of the game, I said we have to lift the task to meet the organism. If you've ever heard me speak, one of the things that I always talk about is the task, the organism, and the environment. And with these really young kids, essentially, you can picture that. We've all had those really young kids. The absolute critical piece to this component is they show up with a skill set as is. And they don't know if they're going to be baseball players, many of them. Right? You might have an idea. There might be 2 or 3 that you know for sure are baseball players. They're going to be in it for the long haul. But many of them are just sampling the sport. So it's our ultimate task as coaches to take the task, whatever that is, and raise it to their level of skill set. When it comes to hitting, oftentimes what I'm doing is if they have a hard time hitting, I'm enlarging the target. I give them a bigger ball. I say, let's do this. And then we create excitement that way. Doug knows if we're in the outfield and they don't have glove skills, the last thing I'm going to do is throw them baseballs, bang them off their nose. We'll go to tennis balls, right? So from that very, very big macro level, your sole focus is take that, take that task, whatever it is, and elevate it to their skill set or drop it to their skill set. But you have to be very flexible as a coach, not to over challenge the kid to meet the task, because they might quit if you do that. It is absolutely take the task and match the kid, okay? Because, and in that top right corner, this is what I believe young kids truly are looking for in the game. Emotionally, they want to belong. Mentally, they want to learn. And physically, they want to have fun. If you think about like elementary school, like one of the best games they play out at recess is tag. Like when they go outside, they're playing tag. They're playing tag because everyone can play tag. Like, you don't have to separate people, you don't have to dismiss people, everyone can play tag. Belonging, they all belong. They in a school environment, they're such willing learners. They constantly want to raise their hand. They want to fit, they want to be right? So that's that age group at this young age. Now, the risk at this young age is they are absolutely driven by external things. Okay, think about those young kids. What are they driven by? They're driven by being right. They're driven by trophies. They're driven by just anything that can create like winners, right? They want to race. They want to win. Like that's what they're driven by. So they're motivated by all these external things. The very good thing about this big picture, this macro picture, is they are very, very vulnerable to learning habits, right? So this is the age where all of those things that you think are ultra important as a baseball coach, you can absolutely drive them home, all right? So teaching this big picture love of the game doesn't mean you don't teach critical principles. You absolutely teach critical principles, and I'd like to talk about that before we move, but you got to be careful with getting too specific too quick, okay? So I was thinking as a coach, like one of the things that I know is very helpful for the younger kids is when you can set those principles in action and there's not much conflict with them. Like we were really good at the young age because we didn't really send conflicting messages. So what do I mean by that? Well, as a hitter, we wanted to swing with intent when we were young. I mean, our kids knew that was one of our principles. That was one of those habits that we are going to lock in from day one, and it's not going to change. I don't care how old you get. And our kids believed it. And here's a big teaching point for this macro level. And this is one thing that if you only hear one thing coming out of this, might be one of them. We have to be process coaches and not result coaches. So if one of my principles is we swing with intent, and we never waver from that principle, if you swing and miss and your helmet comes flying off your head, I'm still clapping. I'm still clapping, right? Because that's a principle. We swing with intent. I'm sorry that you didn't hit the ball. I wish you'd rather have hit the ball, but you still swung with intent, and I'm going to applaud you for that. Okay, so, and when I tell you that set us apart from other people, I mean not just marginally. I mean in a very, very big way. Maybe our biggest glaring difference. Because what I would see time and time again is I would see a kid swing and a miss, and then immediately a coach would correct that behavior, or a mom would yell, keep your eye on the ball. And all of these coaching principles came driving home. They started to take that lens and really start to restrict it on that kid. And we would be there, yeah, but he just missed. All he did was miss. This next pitch, he might hit. And if he hits it, then you're going to be applauding, and he's not going to change his behavior. So in the batter's box, one of our unwavering principles that we never ever wavered on at that young age was always reward intent in the batter's box. Okay, and anyone can reward doubles, and anyone can reward triples, and anyone can reward home runs. It takes a very principled coach to reward intent, even when intent doesn't pay off. Okay, so that is principle number one at this big macro perspective. That's in the batter's box. On defense, one of the things that we would always say, and I still say, I say the best defensive team is the most accurate throwing team. The best defensive team is the most accurate throwing team. That's a principle I believe in. I think that we can't control fields. We at the big league level, maybe they can do a better job. Maybe they can manicure the field. Maybe they can do these things. But the field is a factor that I don't always have control over. I don't always have control over the equipment that they use. But what we can at least practice is we want you to hit targets. We want you to hit targets. We want you to hit targets. So we would be less punitive on errors with the glove. We would be more punitive on errors with the throw. And we would back that up time and time again. If the ball goes between your legs, he gets first base. If you throw it over the first baseman's head, he gets second base. We have to be very, very precise with throwing the ball. And the other cool thing about this at this macro level, at this really young level, is practices break down when you hit ground balls. Like, it's just not fun when you're always hitting ground balls because they don't feel them. and then you're waiting. So one of the things that we would do, and we still do it, even with the older kids, is we eliminate the ground ball and we just throw the ball. So I'll go out right in the middle of the diamond, right there by the pitcher's mound, and we call it the star drill, and we do this from 7 years old all the way up to high school. And I'll just fire a ball at the shortstop, and I'll make him be an athlete, and then he'll field it, and then he'll throw it across the diamond to first base, and the first baseman will throw it to the catcher, and the catcher to the second baseman, apply the tag, second baseman to third baseman, and then back to first, and we call that one star, and it's fun. And at the younger ages, you know, they might not be able to complete it, but when they do, it's success. And the ball doesn't hit the ground. It's one of our foundational principles. It's become so ingrained in some of the older kids when, you know, someone will throw a ball away and I'll hear them saying, most accurate throwing team is the best defensive team. And I'm like, yeah. Right? So this young age, when you design your practice plans, you are thinking, how can I, first and foremost, how can I have fun? How can I teach them the game through these fun games? You know, how can I make them belong? But you have an incredible opportunity to create habits, to create principles that you will not break as they get older. Okay. So hitting, we talked about intent. Defense, one of our key principles was throwing. The other thing that I'm open to discuss, like someone might be able to convince me otherwise, but for the longest time, and even now, I think this is more of a principle than it is a belief. I really believe that kids need to learn to use one hand as early as possible, And I know that goes often against conventional thinking, but I'm of the opinion that as early as possible, I want my athletes that play baseball to use the hand that the glove is sitting on. So often we yell two hands because we're trying to create an insurance policy when they miss it, that when that ball bounces off your glove, this other hand is here to protect it. So ever since I've had kids, my parents have heard me, my assistant coaches, I have been preaching one hand, one hand, one hand, one hand, one hand. As a catcher, it's obvious. As a first baseman, it becomes pretty obvious. Those are two important positions to catch the ball. The same is true in all other positions. This hand comes into play when you're trying to transition for a throw, but the act of catching a baseball is done with one hand. That is a principle of mine that I believe in. As the gloves have improved over the years, I think it's validated my position. I think back in the 50s, 40s, 30s, these crazy pieces of equipment were very cumbersome, and you needed a second hand to prevent it from ejecting. What we have now, and they better be good at $300 or whatever they are. You know, that thing alone should suffice. So I have a principle that we drive home at that macro level of intent in the box. We drive home the idea of defensively, the accuracy. We talk about being one-handed.
Can you pause 1 second about the one hand? So when you said you push that, so is that what you push at practice, but if there's a routine fly ball in a game, do you want that? I understand the concept, but would you still like to see that second hand for the younger kids in game time situation with drilling and working hard with one-handedness in practice?
So here's a message I would tell my kids, and I tell them at a very early age. First of all, at a very early age, I want to make sure that at all costs they love coming to practice. Once I see some kid that's motivated to learn and he desperately, I know he's going to get better. And truth be told, I had a lot of those kids real early. I knew they were lifelong baseball players. My message to them was this. Look, if you catch the ball, your coach is going to be happy. Are you hearing me? If you catch the ball, your coach is going to be happy. Some coaches that you play for are going to say use two hands. The coach you're currently playing for, that is me. I don't care how many hands you use. I want the ball caught. Okay, so I know that the glove hand has to do the catching of the ball. All right, if this hand is involved in the act of catching, something is wrong. All right, something is wrong. This hand is not meant to catch. This hand is meant to throw. So I'm telling you right now that this guy that you're playing for wants the ball caught. I think the ball should be caught with one hand. If you play for a coach that says two hands, you're probably going to have to catch with two hands. But this guy you currently play for believes that you catch the ball with one hand. And then I'll also add that you know, I'm an Oriole fan, and J.J. Hardy fields ground balls with one hand. Now that's unconventional. You know, if you watch a lot of infielders, you'll see them field the ball with two hands. And they interviewed J.J. Hardy, and they say, why do you field the ball with one hand? And his answer was,